The parking lot was empty at 6:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I had checked my phone right before I saw her, calculating whether I had enough minutes to grab coffee from the vending machine before my shift started. I was already running the math in my head, already thinking about the stack of files waiting on my desk, already preparing the careful, invisible version of myself that I wore inside that building every single day. And then I saw her. She was sitting on the concrete curb between two parked cars, her back against a black sedan, her knees pulled loosely to her chest. Her blazer was folded neatly beside her, because even in that moment, even completely alone and falling apart, she couldn't let anything be out of place. Her face was turned slightly away from me, but her shoulders were shaking, not dramatically. Not the kind of crying you see in movies where everything is loud and obvious. This was the quiet kind. The kind people do when they've had a lot of practice doing it alone. Her name was Diana Hartwell. She was my boss, and I was the last person on earth she would have wanted to see her like that. I had worked under Diana for 3 years at Callaway Financial Group. She was the kind of woman people described in a single breath: sharp, composed, impossible to read. She ran her department the way a surgeon runs an operating room, precise, efficient, and with absolutely no tolerance for anything that wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't cruel. I want to be honest about that. She never embarrassed anyone publicly or played favorites in ways that were obvious. But she was distant in a way that felt like a wall, and most of us had long since stopped trying to climb it. I respected her. I also kept my distance. The way you keep your distance from something that seems like it could cut you without meaning to. So when I saw her sitting on that curb, crying in the early morning silence of a half-empty parking lot, my first instinct was to turn around, to go back the way I came, to pretend I had arrived from a different direction and never seen any of it. It would have been the easy thing, the professional thing, the thing that preserved both of our dignities and let us walk into that building 10 minutes later, pretending the world was exactly as it was supposed to be. I turned around. I took 3 steps back toward the street, and then something stopped me. Not a sound, not a movement, just something I can't fully explain. A feeling, maybe, the kind that sits in your chest and quietly refuses to let you be the person who walks away. I turned back. I walked over slowly, not announcing myself until I was close enough that startling her would have been worse than just being there. She heard my footsteps and looked up. And for one long second we just stared at each other, her with tears still wet on her face, me with my coffee money still in my hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't apologize or straighten up or reach for her blazer. She just looked at me with this expression I had never seen on her before. Not embarrassment exactly, something older than embarrassment, something that looked a lot like exhaustion. I sat down on the curb next to her, not across from her. Not crouching down at a professional distance. I sat down right next to her on the cold concrete, about a foot of space between us, and I looked out at the parking lot the same way she was looking at it. Neither of us said anything for a while. The morning was still grey, that particular kind of quiet that exists only before the world decides to start up again. A bird was doing something in a tree at the edge of the lot. A streetlight a block away flickered twice and went still. I could hear her breathing slow down gradually, the shaking in her shoulders settling, like water going. Calm after something has been thrown into it. After maybe 5 minutes, she said, "You're going to be late." I said, "Probably." She almost smiled. I could see it in the corner of her mouth, not quite making it all the way, but trying. "You should go in," she said. "I'll go in when you go in," I told her. She didn't argue. She also didn't tell me to leave. She looked back out at the parking lot, and I looked out with her, and the silence between us stopped, feeling uncomfortable, and started feeling like something else, something I didn't have a precise word for but recognized anyway. I didn't ask her what was wrong. I want you to understand that clearly. I didn't ask because it wasn't mine to ask. Whatever had pulled her out here to cry alone on a curb before 7 in the morning belonged to her, and she hadn't offered it. And I wasn't going to take it just because I was sitting next to her. Some things people carry in private, not because they're ashamed of them, but because they've been carrying them Alone for so long they don't know how to hand them to someone else. You can see that in a person if you look. About 15 minutes before the building officially opened, she picked up her blazer and stood up. She smoothed it out carefully. She ran her fingers under her eyes once, quickly, efficiently. She looked like herself again. Or rather, she looked like the version of herself that the building required. She looked at me and said, "Thank you, Ryan." She had never used my first name before. In 3 years, it had always been Ryan. In the way bosses say it, last name, energy wrapped in a first name, just professional enough to maintain distance. This was different. This was just my name in her mouth, like I was an actual person she actually knew. I nodded. She walked inside, and that was it. The following week was strange. Not bad strange, just strange in the way things are when the shape of something has changed. But you can't quite point to the specific moment it changed. Diana was professional as always in meetings. She ran the department with the same precision. She gave feedback the same way, issued directives the same way, ran the quarterly review with the same clipped efficiency. But she wouldn't look at me. Not in the obvious way. She didn't avoid me when it was necessary. Didn't skip over me in meetings. Didn't pretend I wasn't in the room. But when there was no specific reason to look at me, she didn't. The particular way her eyes moved around a room had shifted slightly. And I happened to be in the blind spot. I understood. I wasn't offended. When someone has been seen in a moment, they didn't choose to show you. They need time to figure out what that means about the relationship going forward. She was working out what I was to her now. Whether I was a threat or a witness or just a person who had accidentally stumbled into something private and was decent enough not to make it into more than it was. I gave her the time. I went about my work. I said good morning when it was natural, contributed in meetings, did nothing that would force her hand or remind her of anything. 3 weeks later, she stopped by my desk on a Tuesday afternoon. She placed a folder next to my keyboard and said, "I'd like your analysis on the Morrison account by Thursday." Not the department's analysis. Yours specifically. She walked away before I could respond. In 3 years, she had never asked for my specific analysis on anything. I was part of a team. Teams produced team outputs. That was the system. I did the analysis. I put everything into it, not to impress her, but because it felt like something had been offered, and I wanted to honor it properly. I slid it under her office door Thursday morning. That Friday, she forwarded it to the senior partners with my name on it. I'm not going to tell you that everything transformed dramatically after that. Life doesn't usually work the way it does in the stories we tell ourselves about it. Diana didn't become a different person. She was still reserved, still exact, still not the kind of woman who made small talk or lingered after meetings for the pleasure of it. But things were different in the ways that actually mattered. She started asking for my work by name. Not constantly, not exclusively, but with a regularity that the rest of the department noticed. She began including me in conversations with clients I had previously never had access to. When I made a mistake on a projection in October, and it was a real mistake, a significant one, she called me into her office and corrected me in private, quietly and without theater, and then closed the subject entirely and moved on. She treated me like someone whose opinion had weight. I hadn't asked for any of it. I hadn't done anything to earn it except sit down on a curb beside her on a cold morning and stay. The part of the story I haven't told you yet is what I learned about her later. Not from her. She never told me directly, and I never asked. But in an organization of 40 people, silence only travels so far. Her mother had been sick for 2 years. Really sick. The kind that requires you to become 2 people at once. The person you are at home holding things together, and the person you are at work, pretending things are fine. She had been doing that quietly, without adjustment to her schedule, without asking for accommodation, without letting a single thing slip inside those walls. The morning I found her in the parking lot was the morning after she had come back from the hospital, where her mother had spent the night. She had driven straight to work because she didn't know what else to do with herself. She had sat in her car for an hour before she got out. When she got out, she made it exactly as far as the curb. She never told me any of this, but I thought about it a lot, about how much a person can be holding and how invisible it all looks from the outside. About how someone can be standing in front of you every day, running meetings and signing off on reports and answering emails in complete sentences, and inside they are doing something extraordinary just to remain upright. We never spoke about that morning, not once in all the time that followed. It was hers. I didn't need it to mean something it wasn't. What it was this. A person was having the hardest kind of morning, and instead of walking past, I sat down. That was the whole thing. That was all of it. Her mother passed away in February. Diana was out for a week. When she came back, she looked the same as always, or nearly. There was something around her eyes, a kind of settled weight, the particular expression of someone who has been through the worst of something and come out the other side of it still standing. On her first day back, before the morning meeting, she stopped by my desk again. She didn't say anything about her mother. She didn't reference anything from the past months. She just looked at me for a moment and said, "I need you to lead the Henderson presentation next week. I'll be in the room, but it's your show." I looked up at her. She met my eyes, properly, directly, the way she hadn't quite managed to do for a long time. I said, "I'll be ready." She nodded once and walked to her office. I've thought a lot about what I would tell someone if they asked me what the most important thing I've ever done in my professional life was. The promotions and the late nights and the projects I'm proud of. Those are real. Those matter. But if I'm being honest, the thing that changed the most wasn't any of that. It was 6:47 in the morning in a parking lot. It was turning back instead of walking away. It was sitting down on a cold curb next to someone who needed another human being to simply be present, and asking nothing in return, and trusting that sometimes the only thing a person needs is to not be alone in the hardest part of the morning. Kindness doesn't always look like kindness when you're inside it. Sometimes it just looks like staying when it would have been easier to go. I stayed, and I have never once, not for a single day since, regretted it. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you that the smallest choice to stay, to sit down, to show up for another person, can quietly change everything, then you already know why stories like these matter. Watch until the very end next time, because the moment that changes everything almost always comes when you least expect it. And if you want more stories about real human kindness, the quiet, unglamorous, powerful kind, hit subscribe. This channel exists for people who still believe that how we treat each other is the most important thing. Don't leave yet. The best ones are still coming.